Well, we want to welcome everybody that has so far gotten on, and we know more people will be coming on as they find out uh, several things that are happening. Now, obviously, a lot of people are focused on some of the events in Florida yesterday. I'm sure that Colonel Richard Black was with us tonight, former head of the U.S. Army's Criminal Law Division at the Pentagon. He'll have some things to say. Uh, but we want to, on the one hand, welcome everyone, as we always do. Uh, the two candidates, Diane Sare and Jose Vega, are independent candidates. And what that has meant is that we've sought as best we could to make sure that the platform of their supporters and organizers was open to everybody. So we've had candidates on like Dennis Kucinich, former congressman of Ohio, from Ohio, who's running as an independent this time. We had on Jen Perlman from Florida, was an independent candidate for Congress down there. She was running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz at the time. But beyond that, we've also tried as best we could to have other forms of independent voices that people don't normally get a chance to talk to or hear from. So we've had Scott Ritter on, we've had on Dennis Fritz, who actually I think is with us tonight, the head of the Eisenhower Media Network. We had Norm Finkelstein on with us twice. And we make it clear that it's our belief that the discourse in the nation must become positive and positively uncomfortable at the same time. It has to be a thing where those who have different political viewpoints, but at the same time have a common interest in humanity, can talk and can come together and deliberate. So that's what the campaigns have tried to do. So I'm going to go right to Diane Sare right now, who is a independent candidate for the United States Senate. And she may or may not wish to make an announcement. I'll leave it to her about an upcoming event. But we've obviously prompted that a bit. So Diane, you have the floor.
Sure. In that case, I will make the announcement, which I will say there's going to be a major event in New York City, co-organized by myself and Jose Vega on October 19th. And it is going to be a classical concert, but also an indoor peace, anti-war, anti-genocide rally. And I hope that some of our speakers here tonight will be able to join us there. I think the cultural component is extremely important, especially when confronted with the tension of the horror occurring in Gaza right now, spreading to the West Bank and elsewhere, which is an almost unbearable tension, I think, for people who even try to imagine such conditions, which are almost unimaginable. And you combine that with the tension of knowing that it's very likely that Biden and Keir Starmer, in their discussions, agreed that Ukraine can use the weapons we send them to launch strikes deep inside Russia. How do you think the United States would respond if Russia were arming Canada and told them, go ahead, you can hit the Washington Monument or the White House or people on the beach in Florida? Clearly, we would be in a position where we were forced to act. So the question is, where do you find the strength within yourself and also the faith in the face of all of this ugliness, the faith to know that human beings actually are good, that human beings are born to be good, that it requires an enormous amount of money, brainwashing, cultural depravity to induce human beings to willfully harm each other, and that somehow this has to be reversed, and we have to have a much higher idea about where mankind is heading. One of my biggest concerns as a candidate for US Senate and having traveled all over the state, particularly recently at some of the fairs and seen how much more impoverished the population is than they were a year ago. And you see this by their demoralization, the dullness in their eyes, their lack of cleanliness and hygiene, obesity. You see a really demoralized society. Just to know, New York State has 3 of the top 10 cities in the whole country in child poverty. The city of Syracuse, New York, has 46% of children living below the poverty line. So people in these conditions tend to set a very low, they just wish they might be able to afford to move into an apartment where everyone has their own room, or they might not be foreclosed upon, or they are desperate for crumbs. And what we will have the opportunity to do is to reorganize everything, because the entire transatlantic financial system, this Anglo-Dutch imperial colonialist system, is thoroughly bankrupt. It is going to collapse, whether it takes us all down with it in the form of a horrific global war, or it somehow desists and we can create a new paradigm, I think depends largely on us. So we are living at an incredible moment where our actions are going to make a huge difference. And it's my concern, particularly, that we uplift people to be able to act in history for what mankind urgently needs, which is not just the absence of atrocities and evil, but the conditions that really are worthy of man. So that's what I'll say. The event on October 19th is going to be a very, very big deal. It is going to cost a lot of money, but I think is worthwhile because of the kind of intervention. We can't say we want to stop thermonuclear war and genocide and then say, oh, and by the way, if you take 5 minutes of your time and give us $3, we're going to change the course of history. That's not how history works. So that's what I have. Put that on your calendars, October 19th. It's a Saturday. I hope everyone will be there, and we'll be giving you specific organizing tasks as the details are all secured.
Thank you, Diane. Jose Vega, who is a candidate in the 15th Congressional District in the Bronx in New York, began his campaign because he was requested to do it. He was requested to do it because he became so well known nationally for his interventions against the erstwhile political leadership of the United States, beginning with Kamala Harris, actually, and then going to people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, then also the entire press corps, actually, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and others, extending to various other entities. And he is trying to do something which people don't believe can be done, and that is that make the Bronx the center of a turnaround of the entire United States, particularly when it comes to the question of education, science, and technology. He's done a lot of things, and so I'm just introducing him, and he will introduce our first guest speaker for the evening, Jose.
Yeah, hi. Okay, so I take it you can hear me okay, Dennis, and you'll stop
Yes.
me if you can't. All right, perfect. So look, we're meeting here on a the precipice of total nuclear annihilation, pretty much. And we almost saw that this weekend on Friday, when the world was on the edge of its seat, wondering if Biden was going to allow Ukraine to use long-range missiles into Russian territory. And thankfully, something intervened, or someone intervened, and the United States announced that there would be no shift in its foreign policy. Now, on top of that, 24 hours ago, there was just another assassination attempt on former President Trump. And of course, I know a lot of you on here who are pro-Palestinian activists are asking the same question I am asking when it comes to this election. How many more dead Palestinians will it cost for Kamala Harris to win this election? Or how many more dead Palestinians is it worth to the Democratic Party to say is okay to be killed in order for Kamala Harris to win? There are people who say we should just wait for Kamala Harris to win and she will stop the genocide. I have seen no basis or reason for that to happen. And the people who are rightfully calling her out for her hypocrisy, for calling for a ceasefire, and yet saying the United States will continue to have the most lethal army in the world. I appreciate all the people calling her out for her hypocrisy on that. But the real question is, what are we all supposed to do about this? Because we are not supposed to just be spectators in this sport that we call politics. We are active players. We do not sit in the benches. We are in the field, and it matters what we actually do, and all action has consequence, and all action has power. Now, the first person we're going to go to is Senator Richard Black. He's a colonel, a U.S. Army judge, Advocate General Corps. He is a prominent conservative who served 8 years in the Virginia State Senate. He represented 250,000 people in Loudoun County and the Prince William counties. And he also served 8 years in the Virginia House of Delegates. I'm proud to say that I've known Senator Black for a very long time now. He's a good friend of mine, and I want to pass it over to him to give us his thoughts. And I would just want to emphasize again, we have room for questions as well, Senator, but please go ahead. And after Senator Black, we will go to Dr. Mark Perlmutter.
Well, thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm excited about the candidacy of Jose-Vega, the chance to make the Bronx great again. I think that you talk about an alternative between someone who lives, works, and breathes the Bronx, and somebody who's one of these guys with shiny shoes and diamond rings, bopping in and out of the Bronx to wave a little bit at the little people. I'm unimpressed by that kind of guy. I think anybody who wants to vote for the interests of the Bronx is going to be voting for Jose-Vega. And I am very delighted to be here also on behalf of Diane Sare, very, very lovely, gracious, talented, brilliant independent who gives you a very stark contrast with Senator Hildebrand. You talk about somebody who has no interest in New York people. Hildebrand is that person, and Diane is certainly very interested in the welfare, the well-being of the people. And with that, let me just mention the sort of what I see in this second assassination attempt. To my knowledge, there has never been a situation where a president or former president of the United States has ever been the victim of attempted assassinations twice within 2 months. You look at the way that the deep state is after Donald Trump. They brought just fictitious impeachment proceedings against him. They literally started to impeach President Trump before he was sworn into office. Now that is fantastic. So they conducted one of these. They conducted one on the way out where he was not even allowed to present any evidence because they had to keep things moving. I mean, it was just a total mockery of any sort of justice. So we saw that. We've seen him indicted in various places. We've seen him civilly sued, and all of these things are just phenomenal hoaxes. Every one of these trials is nothing but a political show trial. And so we see them bringing all of these actions, and hey, if that doesn't do, maybe it's time that we simply gun him down. Now, we used to always talk about, the banana republics and all, and I'm going to tell you, bananas are us. the types of things that we do in this country in our political process are pretty astounding. Here you have the second time in two months, Secret Service is responsible for protecting the candidate for president of the United States, and yet they said once again, oh, we don't have enough people. We don't have enough people. You don't have enough people to guard the future president of the United States, and yet you can send tens and tens of thousands of troops abroad to go and defend something over in Ukraine or this place or that place. Give me a break. We don't defend ourselves. We don't defend our people. We don't promote our people. All we care about is the interests of the deep state and these globalist billionaires. So the situation there, they literally allowed a guy with an AK-47 and a sniper scope to get within close enough range to where an ordinary shot probably could have shot him without a scope. 300 to 500 yards out. I've shot at targets at 500 yards and gotten every shot in the bullseye. So, and that's without a sniper scope. So it is astounding the fact now Trump is thanking the Secret Service, and it's probably wise. He doesn't want to get people off in a rabbit hole, but I got to tell you, this Secret Service is not doing their job, and I think they're deliberately not doing their job. Now, what's happening in the background of all of this is this tremendous drive towards war. There are within the State Department, the CIA, within all of the Western power establishment, there is this desire to pull apart Russia and basically to loot the entire nation, the largest country on the face of the earth. There literally are people who just want to tear it apart and to profit from it. But the Ukrainian project is unraveling. The war is going very badly. And I think, November the 5th, they've got to prop it up until that point. And so now we have Secretary of State Tony Blinken, and he's conferring with his counterpart in the UK. And they're saying, okay, maybe the US should provide these long-range ATACMS missiles, and the British will provide their Storm Shadow missile. Now imagine if you are living in Moscow, and all of a sudden you know that this wild-eyed buffoon Zelensky, who is not there with a legal mandate, he's not the duly elected president. His term expired. He's just some guy, and all of a sudden he has the authority, the unilateral authority to fire missiles into Moscow. He has the unilateral authority to fire them at all of the nuclear defenses of Russia, at the whole triad, the bombers, the missiles, everything. And so for the time being, they seem to have backed off. But with this group, this is kind of the way they do it. They put the information out, they get a backlash, they back off, then they try it later. And that's just how they got the M1 tank. It's how they got all of these weapons. So it's a very dangerous time, I think, particularly between now and the election. And I would tell you, we must take action. And I think people can take action by pulling the lever for Jose Vega and for Diane Sare. And I hope you get a really good response from people.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Karen O'Black. Yeah. Oh, good. You're there. Good. Want to make sure you're there. So, all right. So we're going to Dr. Mark Perlmutter. Now, I'm not going to say much of anything about him because we have somebody here who knows him and knows him better than I do. But I will say this. 9/11, Manhattan, 2001, ground zero. Shreveport, Louisiana, I believe it was Hurricane Katrina, I believe, in 2005. Haiti, the Haitian earthquake of 2010. Dr. Perlmutter was at all of these. Yes, he may be the past president of the International College of Surgeons, and he is. The current president, I understand, of the World Surgical Foundation, if I have that right. But that's a lot different than somebody being at every major disaster location somehow. A lot of people are physicians. This man has clearly got the sense of a mission. And he's been on a mission, and he's been in a certain location. And I'll let Morgan take over from here and then just do the rest of the introduction.
Hi, so we have Dr. Perlmutter. He's a hand and upper extremity orthopedic surgeon. He is the president of the World Surgical Foundation, and he was the past president of the United States section of the International College of Surgeons. He has served over 40 life-saving missions in the past 30 years in the throes of destruction from natural disasters to actual war zones. And he spent a month in Gaza. His days consisted of 20-hour work days on limited supplies. And I'll pass the floor to you, Dr. Perlmutter, to tell us about your experience there.
Great, thanks very much. What I mentioned earlier offline was that all those experiences that I've had in my life combined didn't exceed what we saw in our first week in Gaza. Just the first week. I personally brought in 700 pounds of medical supplies, partners of mine that I met them all for the first time in my life in Cairo 2 hours before we drove through the Sinai for 15 hours to get there. But others brought 1,000 pounds of supplies, and all of our literally tons and tons of supplies that we brought with us were gone in the first week. That's how deprived the hospitals were. When we got there, the overwhelming thing that struck us was that the disproportionate density of the patients were children. Gaza's 50% high school kids are younger. Therefore, when a bomb, which is not indiscriminate, drops on a tent city or an apartment building or in a playground or in a mosque, a Catholic church, or even on a synagogue, which existed in the Gaza Strip, it didn't really care who it killed, but certainly 50% of those or more who were killed were at least going to be children. But a disproportionate number were children. And that's because kids can't be bounced around as much. Kids are always concentrated. So the effect of a bomb when it's dropped on a concentrated population like a playground is more effective. And then the timing of the bombing was quite distinct in that it was, although it was all day long, it was really concentrated at the evening prayer and evening dinner. I was there during Ramadan, and the evening meal, iftar, was around 4 o'clock, 4:30-ish. And the drones would start flying with more density over then. The sighting for where the bombs were going to drop was the reason why the drones were there, and the bombs would drop on areas where there were concentrations of people, so their lethal effectiveness was enhanced. And these are 2,000-pound bunker-busting bombs designed for underground, below concrete, 20 feet below the ground, secure bunkers in Afghanistan. Not a collection of tent cities where the same bomb would send shrapnel through 500 tents and through 50 people before it came to rest inside of somebody's chest. The overwhelming thing that we were left with after a couple of days was that this population was being targeted. We saw not a single combatant, not a single person who we could even remotely think was a combatant. We did see people with sniper bullet wounds. I personally saw 2 children that were shot not once by a high velocity bullet round, which has a distinctly different trauma pattern than a pistol round. And it has a distinctly different pattern than a shrapnel from a bomb or the illegal cluster bombs that Israel was dropping, supplied by our taxpayer dollars. I saw two children that were shot twice by snipers. Not once, but twice. One father described that his kid was pulled out of his hand, not hearing any noises. He just felt him jerked out of his hand, and he looked around, and he was 10 yards away, and he saw him get shot what he thought was the first time in the head, and that was the second time he was shot. The first shot is what knocked him 10 yards away. It was right dead center where I would put my stethoscope. Classic high velocity bullet wound was a small entrance hole. And this kid, who was a toddler, was missing his entire back and all of his chest organs between his shoulder blades. And I saw that twice on the same day. 90% of the children who would come to the ER 10 or 20 minutes after a bombing, 90% of the patients were children. Often 3 or 4 on a gurney at the same time. A third would be dead, a third would be dying, and 10% more would die. All were missing a limb or portions of a limb. All were shredded like paper or burnt like a hot dog that was left ignored on a grill. And because of the paucity of medical supplies deliberately imposed by the Israeli government, we were seeing kids die with 15% body burns, where there is no country in the world where a child would die with 15% body burns. Not even in Honduras, where I go, in very austere environments, does a baby die with 15% body burns. And then for the children with greater degrees of body burns, let's just say I would lose my medical license if I revealed what we had to do to control their pain. The second thing that we noticed, that there was a lack of journalists. And that's why I'm speaking to you today. On the way out of Gaza, to speak to my first point, that the population was being targeted, not only did we see, let me backtrack. On the way into Gaza, through an open Rafah border, we saw what we thought was a wonderful thing. There were probably 2 or 3 miles of trucks side by side, 2 trucks side by side, waiting to get in as we did. You went through a process where you identified with the Israeli government who you were, what road you were going to be on, how long it was going to take you to get there. And if you deviated from that, you were going to get a missile through your windshield. And we were there when the World Central Kitchen vans were bombed. They were deconflicted. They each had 6 or 7 people in it, 6 or 7 cell phones, all of which had a positive green dot on it that said, you have been deconflicted. We know where you're at. We can track you with military-grade GPS to within inches. And they had 7 going on in each van. So when that missile went through the hood of each van, it was deliberate. There was no mistaking that who they were and that they were deconflicted, and their entire pathway was tracked out. They never deviated from the same road we were on, that they were bombed on. But on the way out of Rafah, through the Rafah crossing from the European Gaza hospital, which is only about 15 miles into the country and 3 miles from the Israeli border, what we saw were not 3 miles or 2 miles of trucks side by side, a row of 2. We saw 30 miles of trucks, and not 2 by 2. We saw them 8 trucks wide, bumper to bumper. And they had these really bizarre names on them, like CARE and UNHCR and Oxfam and Feed the Children and multiple UN groups and the Red Cross and the Green Crescent. And loads of, and those that weren't marked were clearly overburdened with bananas and pineapples and watermelons and potatoes. And all this fruit was rotting in the sun because Israel would not let them in because they were not deconflict them. So they were deliberately holding water trucks and sanitation equipment and electrical service trucks and generators and food supplies and trucks full of dead chickens. They were not letting them in deliberately to withhold food and medical aid. You combine that with the deliberate bombing of hospitals and clinics and the specific targeting of journalists and doctors and nurses, which were clearly victimized and clearly abused and clearly imprisoned inappropriately. We have patients who were nurses who refused to leave the operating room because they were operating on somebody and they were shot in their knee because they refused to abandon a patient that he was sewing up, taken to Israel with a bullet wound, half of his knee was missing, taken to an Israeli prison, received no medical care, blindfolded, handcuffed, given a juice box a day, sometimes, most times, every other day, dropped at the border on the 45th day of no medical care, maggots coming out of his leg, picked up after he crawled 3 kilometers, just over a mile and a half, if I guess right, in the dirt, naked, not seeing where he's going because his going away present from the Israeli soldier who dropped him off was a rifle butt in his right eye, for which he is now blinded forever. And then I met him when he was brought to the hospital when we were working. You know, so you have a starved, tortured healthcare worker that was deliberately targeted, clearly not Hamas because they let him go. And this is a perfect example of the next topic that I'm thinking about, and that is there's a reason why there were no journalists that were there, and that's because they were also assassinated or imprisoned or had their equipment confiscated. Even Al Jazeera, a respected news agency in the Middle East, they're not even allowed within the Israeli borders right now. So when you create a situation where the free press is not allowed in, and the only place that the press is allowed to go is where the Israeli government takes them, then the truth will never be known. So as we were leaving, we all decided that we had to become the journalists. I'm way out of my normal element speaking to you. This is not where my comfort zone is, but the only way the truth is going to get out is if we say it. I spoke to CNN, and after I told her what I told you, she goes, well, we can't independently confirm that. And I said, no shit, that's the story, that you should be able to confirm this. The fact that you're not allowed in the country is the problem as a journalist. And why aren't you doing backflips protesting that to the Israeli government? You abandon your responsibility as a journalist. And when I spoke to the nice people on CBS Sunday morning, she asked me what the problem was, and I told her that you were the problem. To the lady interviewing me, as a representative of the legacy American media, because you're protecting me from the truth. You're not doing the job that I'm trying to do. She goes, yeah, but it's Sunday morning. We have to be sensitive to what? Right? What better time of the week or hour of the Sunday do you need to tell the truth more than on a Sunday morning? So they put pictures up of the 2 assassinated children. They were so pixelated, it could have been a box of Dunkin' Donuts and nobody would have been able to tell the difference. And so the legacy media is a problem in the United States, largely for the same reason why our elected officials are the same problem, is that they take money from very wealthy conservative Christian groups and from the AIPAC. We don't have term limits, and that makes people's desire to get reelected for money, I think, the problem. Going back to Gaza, the overwhelming opinion of every doctor who was there, ergo every journalist that was there, was that this is a definitive genocide. Israel has 2 choices. They have a 1-state solution. They have a 2-state solution, both of which have failed over decades and decades for the past 75 years. If Israel and therefore the United States, because they're our puppet, we're their puppet. If they were willing to accept it, it would have happened already. So if they don't accept a 1-state solution, they don't accept a 2-state solution, their only other choices are to continue the apartheid state that they've been promulgating for the last 75 years. Gaza was nothing but an open-air prison for 75 years, no different than a supermax prison anywhere else in the world. They couldn't control their own electromagnetic space. They can't go control their ocean that they own. They go 100 yards out into the Mediterranean, they get shot by a gunboat. It was literally an open-air prison. And if you can't continue the apartheid for which South Africa was suing them for, that leaves only one other choice, and that is genocide. And that is exactly what we witnessed. In conclusion, the Palestinians that we saw, the innocent women and children, mostly women and children, most of them that died, were not the collateral damage in Israel's hunt for Hamas, the 1 in 30,000 people in the Gaza Strip that were Hamas fighters. The Palestinian population was not that side effect that was inadvertently hurt. They were the topic of, the focus of the bombing. They are the target of the IDF. That's how you carry out a genocide. That's why the children were targeted. That's why mosques were targeted. That's why all the hospitals were burned and closed. The hospital that I was at, they didn't have to close it. They had a wall around it. They could have put one of my taxpayer-bought Bradley fighting vehicles at each of the 4 entrances. They could have put somebody quite clearly on the corner of every hallway and on every floor with an Uzi. They could have taken care and secured the hospital and continued to provide health care to the population, but instead they chose to close it. They could have ran metal detectors over people. They could have confiscated their SIM cards because they're all Israeli SIM cards. Israel controls the telephone space. And they could have, searched their contacts. If this was a Hamas player, they would have been able to find out. Plus, they had facial recognition on all of them. So they could have kept the hospitals open, but they chose not to for the same reason that they bombed the water reservoir and the water purification plants and the chicken coops and the museums and every school. The 2 medical schools are now gravel underground. The reason why they did that, because they know that the best way to dehumanize a population is to kill the humans. It's specifically a genocide going on, and our taxpayer dollars are paying for it. That's why I went to Gaza, because I knew it was 50% children, and I knew that my tax dollars were responsible for killing innocent people. And that's why I'm going back.
Well, thank you very much. You're going to obviously get questions. We're going to ask for a response. I just want to say one thing that that's come to me. It's a text message from someone, Anastasia Battle, who runs the what's called the International Peace Coalition. This is an organization which last Friday has meetings every Friday. Last Friday, we got up to, on that meeting, about 1,000 people. That's partially Zoom audience and central audience. That audience also heard from different people like Ted Postal and Larry Wilkerson. Others have been on. And we are requesting that you, if you can, would definitely join that meeting at 11 o'clock this coming Friday. Don't know if you can do that. I just wanted to put that in to say that. And it would be important. This message clearly has to get to as many. And there are journalists and others that are on that. It's an international meeting. Last week, we had 46 nations on. And I think that'll be approximately what it would be this week as well. Just wanted to say that. So just in terms of...
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So just in terms of response, Jose, I'm going to go to you first, and then Diane and Colonel Black. I'm sure you guys probably want to respond.
Yeah.
Actually, there is something I think that you could speak on, Dr. Perlmutter, which is this. Morgan, can you pull it up? Can you just say a little bit about what it was? You posted something on your Instagram, Doctor.
We wish if you would tell us a little more about the testimony that you gave that allowed for the suspension of UK arms sales to Israel. Could you tell us how that came about, the initiatives that you worked with to get that thing going, and if there's anything that's kind of in the works here?
Sure. I'll answer the in the works portion part. I've appealed to speak to the German parliament and to the French parliament. I think the way to get our government to realize what we're doing wrong is to get prominent nuclear capable European partners that we have longstanding relationships with to reverse their stance first, so that the United States won't take the lead. I mean, if you look at our behavior, we won't send the Abrams tank until the Leopard was sent first. We won't send ATACMS until the Storm Shadow was sent first. We won't send F-16s until the Gripen was offered first. So we're following under pressure, and I think that we'll fall under pressure. So we appealed and presented evidence through their legal system. we wrote a letter to every single upper and lower house parliamentarian and to the prime minister, the same letter that we wrote to Biden and to every U.S. senator and to Harris. And it was signed by almost 100 Gazan volunteer physicians, nurses, and therapists. And we added to that all the British volunteers that we met there, and those from Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Jordan. So there were hundreds of people who signed it, and or at least up to hundreds. I don't know the exact number. And we showed photographs, and we said, this is the effect of English bombs. This is the effect of a German bomb and an American bomb, mostly American, followed by German, followed by English. And our countries are on the wrong side of history here. And so we espouse the history and just ask them to halt arms sales until the truth comes out, until the ICJ's rulings come out. Then we testified to the ICJ, as did several docs, and provided shrapnel evidence. I brought shrapnel back with me, and evidence for illegal weapons usage, and then photographs of children that were assassinated.
And they halted the sales, right? That's
right. Wow. About 2 weeks ago.
All right. Yeah, that's okay. Thank you for expanding on that. Yeah, I'll pass it back to you, Dennis.
Okay, very good. Colonel Black, let's go to you first.
Yes, thank you. It's really an honor to be here with you tonight, Dr. Perlmutter. I just want to thank you for having the courage to go over there and to do the work that you did, and also especially to have the courage to articulate to the civilized world, what we call the civilized world, what barbaric things we are a party to. I received a small video not long ago of one of the children who had been wounded in Gaza. And just by way of background, I'll tell you, I have a very intense combat background, and I've personally, with my hands, tried to put out the burning phosphorus that had engulfed a Marine on the battlefield, and his eyes were burned out, his skin was slewing off, and we rushed him out to a helicopter, and later that night we heard he had died. And I would tell you, every one of us who had been involved just prayed to God and thanked him for delivering that man from his pain and suffering. Now, I just say that by way of telling you that by far the most horrific thing I have ever seen is what I saw in this video from Gaza. It was a single young girl, about 10 years old, and she was in a place where people were trying to help her. I don't know how she managed to stand, but she was standing on her feet, turning from one direction to the other, trying to figure out what to do. As she stood there, there were pieces of her face, and I'm not talking about a fleck, I'm talking about a handful of flesh falling to the floor. And I saw this, I was so shocked, and it was so jarring to me that I stood there with tears coming down my face and just trying to think of a prayer. And what do you pray for this child other than a quick death? It is so stunning. Now, I know something can happen to one child that is just indescribable. But what I see is an organized effort to simply exterminate the people of Gaza as though they were Untermenschen. They were the under people. They were the cockroaches of the world. And they aren't. They are living, breathing brothers and sisters of ours. And it is just, I find it indescribable that the government that represents me is a party to this. We provide those 2,000-pound bombs, and I have dropped them in Vietnam as a forward air controller. I know what they do. Only did them once, and the impact of those is horrific. So I'm just grateful to you, Dr. Perlmutter, for your courage and all that you've done. It's extremely important.
Thank you, Colonel Black. Diane?
I also really want to thank you, and I would like us to do everything that we can to amplify your message. I don't know if the letter that you've sent to the Congress is something that's public.
It is.
Okay. If you could share it with us, I think that's very, very important, especially myself, Jose. There's another independent candidate for Congress running in Connecticut, Ben Wesley, who's on here as well. Because obviously any representative of the government of the United States has to be held accountable to act on this. I also wanted to ask if you have, I mean, clearly we're dealing with organizations like the Anti-Defamation League and AIPAC, and we are seeing an extreme censorship come crashing down because I think there's some fear that if there's a change in government or administration in the upcoming election, that some of the policies, the war policies, might be altered. Also, I think there's extreme pressure on students to try and silence them after what we saw on the campuses. So I imagine you have thoughts on all of this, and I would like to hear what you think.
In a month, I'll comment on what you had said and what the previous gentleman had said. In a month, we're speaking to Toronto and to Columbia University. Columbia University, they've already fired people from the International Studies Department for speaking out in favor of Gaza. In the global health program, they fired 3 professors. It's a 2-year program for a master's in public health. One of the students was suspended for a whole year for speaking at the encampment on Columbia's property. And we've applied for permission to speak to the medical school at their grand rounds to talk about medical care in an austere environment in a war zone. A political topic, just to talk about what we saw in Gaza, and we were not going to talk about our political viewpoints, and we were denied that permission even from doctor to doctor type talking, which is something that is obscene. So when you have an Ivy League university succumbing to the pressures of Zionistic organizations and ultra-Christian organizations that supply even more money to Israel than the AIPAC, then that's a tough situation to beat. I have a dear friend of mine who's a first-year student at Columbia in the Master's in Public Health program, and my advice to her text tonight was an old World War II submarine statement is just run silent and run deep. you could be an activist, but don't let your name get out there, because you're going to lose your program, right? To the other comment about the 2,000-pound bombs, that's an awful big explosion that makes. I mean, I was impressed about the hole in the ground that one of those bombs makes. Let's put this in perspective. At the end of World War II, we dropped 2 atomic bombs. Nagasaki is bigger than Gaza. That's the smaller of the 2 cities in Japan that we dropped atomic bombs on, or nuclear weapons on. The first nuclear weapon was on Nagasaki, and it devastated it, obviously. That bomb was dropped on an area that was bigger than Gaza. And then sometime later, we dropped a much bigger bomb on Hiroshima, which is, I believe, 4 times the size of Gaza. And it devastated Hiroshima. The United States supplied bombs. The total equivalent tonnage in TNT that's dropped on just Gaza. By May of this year, exceeded the total tonnage of both atomic bombs that were dropped on both cities in Japan, in an area of square miles that's smaller than either one of them. And so the amount of destruction that we have supplied, destructive capability that we have supplied, is absolutely insane. To think that innocent people are not the specific target of such indiscriminate weapons of mass destruction. In I think it was Minnesota, a kid gets a 9mm SIG for a birthday present. He goes in and shoots a couple of kids. And in the United States, when that happens in a school, we call in the SWAT team to kill the shooter, to neutralize the shooter. And indeed, in that case, they even found the parents guilty for supplying a weapon of mass destruction to an irresponsible party. In Gaza, Israel doesn't go in to shoot the shooter. They drop a bomb on the school and are willing to kill all the children to get somebody they think is a Hamas player. Through their AI program called Lavender, it actually says it's okay to kill 1,000 people to get a high-end Hamas operative, and 300 people or 100 people to get somebody you suspect is a low-level operative. And the United States knows that this program violates the Geneva Convention, and yet we will continue to supply them weapons illicitly, in complete violation of our Leahy Act, in violation of our own laws. We will continue to supply these weapons.
All right, we have several people who have questions, so I'm going to just take this in order. I'm going to take Kynan is first, followed by Clifford, and then Sean. Okay, so Kynan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Yeah, this is Kynan in Queens. Thank you so much, Dr. Perlmutter, for relaying your experience and for detailing your courageous actions in this. And I mean, it's hard. It's really hard to get this kind of experience in such graphic detail, but nevertheless, I think it's something that all of us need to hear. Not that so that it demoralizes us, but that it uplifts us to really stop this carnage, and to take the same courageous actions that you have taken, with respect to us going out in the streets and really getting this done. I had a question for you regarding just the amount of casualties. And I'm thinking about this in regard to the report that was released by the British medical journal, The Lancet, which had said that the casualty toll was as much as 186,000. I think, I haven't checked the official figures recently, but I think it's still somewhere around the range of 40,000. And this figure, of course, it takes in, the bombings and so forth, but just the amount of people that are stuck under this rubble. And of course, the disease also that's been transmitted. And also I heard that polio, which, which you wouldn't think that this would come back, but that the Israelis have been weaponizing polio against Palestinians, and that there's been a huge resurgence of that. So I would ask you, since you were on the ground, what do you think of this report of the casualty figures by the Lancet? And to Colonel Black, since I wanted to ask you, because you were on the ground as a military combatant in Vietnam, and you headed the criminal law division in the Pentagon. How far would you categorize this as being out of the bounds of lawful warfare? And yeah, I think I would just end it there.
Okay, I believe that Colonel Black had to get going. Is he still with us?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, he had to get going. He
And a
had,
message saying he just has to, there's something going domestically he has to deal with. So we won't take that. So go ahead, Dr. Perlmutter.
I'll answer both questions. The first question was the number of casualties. When this is done, you're going to see greater than a 250,000 of people documented. There are millions and millions of tons of concrete and rebar rubble all around. There's no way to tabulate the amount of death that went on. There are mass graves. There are mass graves that are being uncovered. Because of disease, people had to be buried quickly. There's no embalming. And so by tradition, it's within 24 hours. And many of the people just are completely unidentifiable. Or parts of people were completely unidentifiable. You will find the bottom half of a kid, the top half of a kid that don't match, legs or arms that don't match, and the power of these bombs are tremendous. The hospital I was in was never bombed directly. There was one bombing that was close, probably a half a mile away. I was thrown against the wall, broke a tooth, broke a finger. Just the concussion alone threw my 190 pounds across the room. What does that do to an infant? Vaporize them? If they're a quarter mile away, if the shrapnel doesn't hit them, the concussion alone. There's clearly more than 250,000 people are going to be found dead or unaccounted for. No doubt about that. And if you just look at the numbers after the earthquake in Turkey or in Haiti, all the early estimates, how they suddenly rise and climb and increase exponentially as the months go on, as excavations go on. And that's going to happen here if it's allowed to happen in Gaza. The second question was the legality of it. The laws are carved in stone. There's no mystery here. The same way that My Lai was prosecuted in the Vietnam War as a war crime, these war crimes are going to be prosecuted. There's a definitive and an aggressive collection of data that's going on that we don't know about. I'm part of that a little bit, as many docs are, but there's a definitive, avid collection of evidence. Even Haraz's newspaper, the New York Times of the Middle East, just wrote an article about 3 or 4 weeks ago about in the West Bank, not even in Gaza, where an Israeli soldier came forth and admitted he was part of targeting a kid on a soccer field who was shot and killed for no reason. If it's happening for no reason in the West Bank, it's clearly happening in Gaza. So where there's a license to kill for no reason. So the issue of war crimes, I don't think is going to escape what's happening.
Okay. Going to I believe this is Dr. Cliff Kirikoff, Washington Institute for Peace and Development and author of A Dark Crusade, the Israel Lobby and Christian Zionism. Please unmute.
Can you hear me, Dennis?
Yes, we can.
Hey, thank you. I wanted to pay my respect to the Dr. Perlmutter and great admiration for what he and his colleagues are doing. And I think as Americans, we can really be proud that you are out there in Gaza and helping people there amidst this tragic situation. My question would be twofold. You mentioned the success that you have had with Britain in hopefully restraining their weapons sales. You mentioned that Germany was the third largest weapons supplier, and
Second.
maybe you could let us know what you and your colleagues are doing to try to convince the German parliament or authorities to stop their sales of weapons. And I think that's my main question for you. And again, thank you very much for your dedication and inspiration, I think, for younger people. And I think maybe the second question I have is, what can activists like ourselves do? What would you and your colleagues like to see activists such as are on this call and next Friday's call, the international call next Friday? What can we do to help you or in your work, etc.?
Well, I think my work is your work. We all have to approach this problem in different ways. We hit brick walls when we went to Congress to meet with people. For example, the only person that Tammy Duckworth would meet with was Adam Hamawi, who happened to be the Palestinian or Egyptian heritage, married to a Palestinian plastic surgeon that was flown out to her helicopter when she crashed it. I believe it was in Afghanistan. It could have been Iraq. I don't know. But when she crashed as a helicopter pilot, her Apache, he flew out to the helicopter, stopped her from bleeding to death, brought her back, amputated both of her legs, and saved her life. And he is the only one that she would meet with. And had he not been the one to save her life, she would have not met with him, as evidenced by the fact that she wouldn't meet with me before then, right before then, even though I was there with him. So the doors are closed to politicians, and I don't think we're going to work miracles in our government until we get rid of term limits. And change how political action committees can donate money to senators and congressmen and influence and functionally buy their vote. I think that's really for the long play in our country. I think that's what we need to do. I honestly don't think my local senator gives a shit about Israel. He doesn't know anything about it. I think I'm one of the 2 Jews in my county. The issue is that they get money from them that enables their reelection. But if they just ran and tried to advance the truth instead of their own, political future or employment future for all reasonable intents and purpose, I think that will go the longest way in stopping America's long history of funding the wrong side of problems, and not addressing the salient points that need to be addressed in our country. We'll have less deadlock and important decision making, ranging from abortion to the border to every other issue that we get deadlocked on, and especially our issues with war. We are very much the victim of political action committees, and even the AIPAC is not actually, I thought PAC for them was political action committee. It is not a registered political action committee. It's a registered nonprofit, and therefore they can give even more money than a PAC. So the laws are all screwed up in our country, and they're all surrounding that we don't have term limits. So everybody can work on that. Everybody can call their senators and say, this is a problem and we need to work on this. That's the long play for the United States, is salvation and stopping us from funding the bullshit aggression that we're always on the wrong side of history for.
I would also just like to say that one thing I know that we could immediately do we're recording this, and if it's all right with you, Dr. Perlmutter, we can, those of us who are on here, can we circulate this as far as you're concerned?
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. Because what that allows us to do is there's 114 people who are right now connected. Some people have gotten on and off as well. In addition, we have the call on this coming Friday. Do you think you'll be able to join? You would be able to join us on Friday? Is that possible?
It's a possibility. I can't commit to it yet. I have to look up my schedule.
Okay, very good, very good. So let me leave it at that and go back to questions. There may be others, and then Diane, if you have anything or you want to make a comment, or Jose, just raise your hand so I can see you. But we're going to Sean next. If you could unmute.
Hey guys.
Hello.
Hey, I'm Sean. I'm a practicing emergency physician in San Antonio, Texas. I'm also Jewish, did my bar mitzvah in Jerusalem, actually. I just have one question, Mark. Can I get involved with
Sure.
the organization? Can I volunteer with you? That's my question.
Yes.
I'm very interested.
I can, I'll give you my email address so you can communicate with me. It's stupid, so don't laugh at it, but patients remember it. It's goodbyehandpain@gmail.com.
Okay. All right, I'm writing it down. And thank you. Your specialty is obviously one that is incredibly in demand and lucrative. And the fact that you are putting that aside to heed this call is most noble.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for volunteering. Then Roman, going to Roman next. If you can, I see Diane has her hand up. Diane,
I
go ahead.
just want to say one really short thing to Dr. Perlmutter. One of the things that I am advocating for is not merely term limits, but I think in terms of campaign funding, there should be spending limits, because they get around all kinds of things by donation limits, and the whole Congress is an aristocracy because people can give unlimited amounts of their own money. So if you're a wealthy person, there's nothing restraining you. But if you put a spending limit, that would be, I think, a great help.
Totally makes sense.
Yes, and not exercising my moderator's prerogative, I'll only point out one thing. The issue of us having independent candidacies is that's the fundamental thing that has to be done in the country. People are going to, that's what, when Jose began his interventions, we were talking about the idea of 435. First we said candidates, but then we realized it wasn't going to work by saying that. You have to have voices, people who will stand up against injustice and vocally and denounce or challenge the political authorities. That's how Jose got here. Maybe you can say more about that in a minute, Jose. If we should, let's go to Roman first, because and if you have a comment, that'd be good. Roman?
Hello. My first question is for anyone who wants to answer. I am thinking back to when Iran did a retaliatory strike coordinated with the US in order to show Israel that they wouldn't stand for what's going on. And I know that the US and Iran actually coordinated this so that Iran would use the old missiles and none of them would actually hit, but this was to show that they're involved. And the war is now spread, the genocide is now spread, I should say, to Lebanon, to the West Bank. And so I see this spreading, and I don't see a clear indicator of whether this will be contained or not, or whether this is, along with the situation of Ukraine invading Russia, something that will escalate the world into the next world war in a much more involved way. And my second question is for Clifford Kirchhoff. Even though I know you're not meant to be one of the presenters tonight, I'm so fascinated to hear what you would have to say about this, because I live in the South, in Greensboro. Evangelical Christians or people I know, they have a very, very strong support for Israel. It's like in their bones. And I've been to some evangelical Christian Bible studies. I tried to explain why other types of Christians don't support Israel. It was very hard for me to do. And I actually ended up changing denominations. I used to go to an Anglican church, and too many people were praying for Israel. And I actually became Eastern Orthodox because I have nightmares sometimes that like the Anglican church might be supporting Israel too much. It's very strange. And so my question is, can the paleoconservative anti-war right ever actually challenge the evangelical pro-Israel Zionist right? Because I see the pro-Israel Zionist right as something that's so deeply embedded in the culture. It's hard for me to. I have a lot of skepticism that anti-war conservatives can push back against it.
I think if I can go first, because I have to go in a second. Do you mind? I think, and this carries over from the last point too, about how we can act individually for this. I think the charge is to separate Judaism from the Israeli government. The Israeli government does not represent Judaism. It represents Zionism. Zionism is a political ideology that existed 50 years before Israel became a country. And it had its purpose, but now it's been bastardized into nothing more than a justifiable land grab of lands that Palestinians have lived on for millennia. And that's really all it is. Modern Zionism just justifies a land grab. And that's why there's genocide, and that's why there's the atrocities that are going on in the West Bank. And that's why we're living in season 75, episode 9. And that's not going to end until one thing happens. America stops supplying bombs. If we stop supplying weapons, the whole thing comes to a stop. Lebanon would not take place if we didn't give them weapons. It's our supply of weapons that keeps Israel going. If you want to stop the expansion into Lebanon, or they just attacked Syria this week, if you want to stop that, dry up the supply of weapons, because they have no indigenous manufacturing for bombs. Period. We just have to stop being the parents that gave that irresponsible kid the 9mm. We have to stop providing to an irresponsible party the weapon of mass destruction that's causing it. Simple as that.
Okay. Dr. Perlmutter, before you go, I know that both Jose and Diane are going to want to say something to you. I'll just say to the caller, Reverend Munter Isaac, who is here from Palestinian, was in Georgia meeting with Christian Zionists and various of what's it called, the Christians United in support of Israel, whatever it's called, Kufi or whatever it's called. And they were able to convince 8 of the board members that they met with over the course of about 3 hours that they did not know their Bible. They showed them things in the Bible. They were able to actually, and these people admitted to them, they really just did not know what it was that Dr. Isaac brought to them. So he had insisted when he appeared at Riverside Church that it was possible to reach these people. And then he went out and did it in the course of that trip. More about that a bit later, because we may be able to have him come on our platform. There's reasons that we have to work certain things out on that. But I just wanted the caller to know to have hope on that. Jose?
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Doctor, for getting on. I know it was short notice, and I appreciate you got on. I think what you shared with us tonight is really enlightening, and I'm excited to spread this word out. I don't have a very big network. I've got 77,000 followers on my X account, 7,000 on Instagram. Morgan does a better job at social media than I do, and she knows a lot of influencers who can hopefully get your word out much more effectively than I could. And I just want you to know that it's people like you that keep me motivated in what I do in this race. You know,
Thank you.
no, yeah, it's just sometimes there's no reason to be demoralized when there's people like you around who just keep going. So thank you.
Thank you. So Morgan, you'll get in touch with me?
Of course, yes. And thank you so much. Thank you for everything you do, honestly. And being here tonight and spreading this message with the activists on the call. And Dr. Perlmutter will actually be with NC Peace Action on Friday in Raleigh. So if anyone's on this call in Raleigh, please pay your respects and listen to him and help spread his word.
Very, very good. Diane?
Just thank you. And I agree with Jose. Anyone who hears you, if they have any conscience at all, is not going to back down and will be less fearful of the snakes and demons that, especially as, when you go and speak in events and you bring this up, we've all, at least Jose and I, have had people shrieking at us from the audience. So hearing from you is very helpful. It just strengthens our resolve. And if I can get those letters, I want to make use of them.
Yes, please email me to remind me if you don't
Okay.
mind.
Sure.
I can be an airhead.
All right. Well, sometimes to be an idealist, you may appear to be an airhead. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us. And
I'm honored, everybody. Thank you so much. And my email is out there. It's goodbyehandpaint@gmail. My Instagram is just at my name, Mark Perlmutter, MB. If you want to see some photographs that nobody would let me publish. X kicked me off because of my photographs for gratuitous gruesomeness. And they were gruesome, but they weren't gratuitous. And but any way I could help, I will.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Very much.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Go on. If we still have Cliff there, he got a question. So Cliff, can we unmute him, or can he unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, what's the question? I can speak to what Roman raised as well.
Right. Go ahead.
Well, to answer the question of the Christian heretical concept of Christian Zionism, actually, back in 2003, we got ourselves involved in the Iraq or Afghanistan wars, and that impacted me, and I began doing some research on the lobbies that were advocating to go to war against Iraq. And I found that the two Christian so-called lobbies, the Southern Baptist Convention and the National Evangelical Association, teamed up with the Jewish lobby to advocate that we go to war in Iraq. So that got me thinking that I should do more research on that and actually do a book on that. And I had done a book on that, and I have a new book coming out that Dennis kindly mentioned. It's called Dark Crusade, the Israel Lobby and Christian Zionism, and it should be out in hardcover in early October, and then followed by a softcover edition for about $20 or something like that. Hardcover is a little expensive, but the softcover should be about $20. I'll make a couple quick points. Christian Zionism is a heretical position in Christianity that all major churches, mainstream churches in Western and Eastern Christianity reject as a heresy. Roman Catholic, Orthodox, the various Orthodox churches, the Coptic Church, and others, mainstream Protestant churches, all reject Christian Zionism as a heretical idea and concept. I would just say that it was invented as a cult in the 1820s and 1830s in England. And this cult got obsessed with prophecy, and they invented the idea that we're in the end times of history and that Armageddon is going to be coming, and that we must return all the Jews from all around the world to Palestine, to the Holy Land. And when that scenario happens, when millions of Jews come back to Palestine, that will set in motion the next steps in the end times, which involve Armageddon, which in today's lingo could be a nuclear war, for example. They're all for that. They want Armageddon triggered because they think they will then go to heaven, bodily go to heaven, and they won't get involved in the fighting or anything like that because they'll be up in heaven. At any rate, that's the basics. You can look it up. The ideology is called dispensationalism, and you can Google that. And the creator of this cult is a British fellow, John Nelson Darby, D-A-R-B-Y. You can look that up on Google. The cult came to the United States in 1859 when Darby came over here and started preaching. And it took on a head of steam in the late 19th century and early 20th century and became pretty well spread out through a lot of the Protestant fundamentalist churches, not the mainstream type churches, but the fundamentalist type churches. And that's where we find it today. Dennis had mentioned earlier, CUFI, Citizens United for Israel, led by John Hagee, so-called Reverend John Hagee. You can go to the CUFI website, CUFI dot whatever, CUFI, and look at their bizarre ideology. Now, we can consider it weird and bizarre. The problem is that that group of people, just as Dr. Perlmutter pointed out, they put pressure on Congress. And you may have noticed the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson from Louisiana, is one of these Christian Zionists. So we have the Speaker of the House, and who knows how many others in the Senate or in Congress adhere to this weird ideology, which calls for the support of Israel, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not limited to churches. It's actually is politically active in Washington, D.C., influencing Congress and backing up the policies of support for Israel, for example, and its genocide with our weapons. So that's the answer I can give you right now. And you can take a look at my book when it comes out, and happy to answer further in a different discussion. Thank you for your question.
And thank you very much. All right, I think that is it in terms of questions. I don't see anybody else with a question. And so let's now go to summary. Let me go to you first, Diane, see what you have that you'd like to let people either know or you want to say.
We have to win. That's my statement. We have to win. Failure is not an option, and I don't mean win the election in some sense, although that obviously would change a lot of things. At the moment, there's not evidence that we're going to have fair elections, and people heard what Dr. Perlmutter said. But the event that we are planning for October 19th is going to cause political earthquakes if we organize it properly. And as I said, when the details are nailed down and contracts are signed, et cetera, we will be forthcoming with more, but everyone should plan to assist on that. That's
right. I think the basic thing to do is that for those of you who don't have the details now, just know you will be requested to do things that you will believe to be beyond your capacity, but you will nonetheless be able to happily do them. You'll see once we get you some more information, but be ready. You are going to be called on. All of the people on here who petitioned before, for example, have a sense of what I mean by that. So, Jose?
Okay. I was gonna say I can do you one better, Diane. I have it in here printed, not in the virtual world, but yeah, it's the same thing. We take this out in the street every day to the when we go out campaigning. But the only difference is ours says Jose Vega for Congress. And if you actually want to come out with us, we actually go out into campuses. We go out into various places in the Bronx. We go out and we put posters out every weekend. If you want to join us and provoke the people in New York City in specific, now people in the Bronx don't have a problem with this sign. But today we were at the UN. A lot of people gave us the bird. They told us this, they told us that. How could you actually, what are you, pro-Trump this, no. We are here to provoke people to think. I am not about trying to tell people the truth or soften the truth in a way in which it's digestible. That's bullshit. There are people getting blown up right now. If you just heard what Dr. Mark Perlmutter went through, if you actually listened to it and digested it, there is no reason to soften the truth to anyone anymore, because the people of Gaza and the people in Ukraine and the people in the 55 other present war zones do not have the privilege to have the truth digested to them when the truth is presented to them in the form of a 2,000-pound bomb. Okay? So, our job is to use the privilege that we have, that we do not have that reality every day, to move and mobilize and get active with my campaign and Diane's campaign. And campaigns require people, they require energy, they require money. If people are on here and they want to give us some contributions to allow us to keep our campaigns going so that we can print more of these signs and maybe even get it on a billboard, I think that would be funny, Diane, if we actually did get it on a billboard, but that's just me speculating. If you can't come out and volunteer with us, then you should donate. And if you can't donate, then spread the message on social media, but you have to do something so we can continue to build the momentum forward. There's only 50 days exactly until the election. Are we even going to make it to the election? Are we all going to be alive for it? That is a question all of you have to answer right now.
Well, I'll just say about the question of resources, this is important that the campaign limit, I guess, is about $3,300 per candidate, as I understand it.
Right.
And you just did propose something, and I think that's relevant, that one billboard in the city of New York, for example, which had that, would become international news virtually overnight, not to mention the ways in which they would be able to be used in social media. So people should think about that. And think about supporting that and related efforts and initiatives that the campaigns, such as the one that we just were on. I'll simply indicate next week's call will be as productive as this week's call. We can't tell you exactly who's going to be involved, but you should help us by increasing the number of people on this call. And this Friday, for those who are interested in the International Peace Coalition, I think you have a sense of the importance of that as well. But we would very much urge that you support these candidates and candidacies and other independent candidacies, which should become, for which should become a magnet. So please contribute as best you can, both in terms of your own time as in terms of your own resources. So I think that's it. Thank you all for being with us. And I believe, Jose, that's a wrap.
There you go. All right. Good night, everyone.